Welcome to another episode of Ship of War, my review of How to Train Your Dragon 2. How to Train Your Dragon 2 is directed by Dean LeBlanc. It stars Jay Baruchel and then a bunch of other very talented actors and actresses. The list is pretty endless when it comes to this movie. Now, the premise of the story is a continuation of the first installment of How to Train Your Dragon. It's following the story of Hiccup and Toothless, but this takes place like 5 years in the future. Hiccup is no longer a teenager, he's a young adult, he's in his 20s. His village is no longer anti-dragons. The dragons and the Vikings live all among each other. They're all one big community together. Everybody has their own personal dragon that they use for one reason or another. So dragons and Vikings are living very happily in this village. Something then happens that Hiccup ends up discovering, and once that happens, the story unfolds and this movie becomes very interesting. Now, I remember going into the first How to Train Your Dragon with the mindset of like, oh, this is going to be a kid's movie, I'm not going to really care for it possibly, I don't know, and ending up really being surprised by it and laughing a lot, especially with Toothless and just the way he was. He kind of reminded me of my dog, and just, he was fun. And in this movie, we get that same personality. There's a lot of very funny moments with Toothless and the other dragons interacting with each other or interacting with the other Vikings that I really liked. But the difference with this movie, I have to say, in comparisons to the first one, was that the first one was very childlike, while this one had a very adult tone to it. There were certain things about this movie that was very mature, to a point that I remember there was certain scenes in the movie that I would like, sit back and be like, you know what, that shouldn't be in a children's movie, but it is, and I kind of like that it is. Because there's very emotional, intense scenes. There were scenes that didn't feel very like childlike, and yet they were in this movie. People have asked me if I thought this was better than the first one. I honestly can't really say it because they're both good in their own right. It's just the difference between this movie and the first one that I really liked was how mature it was. It was a very mature movie. It had a very mature tone to it, and it wasn't no longer a story about a child trying to discover himself and his place in the world. He already has that place in this world, and he's already an adult, and he's experienced things that adults experience. He's facing things that adults have to face. And there's other certain things I can't really say that happen in this movie that's kind of spoilish, that's very, emotional and very intense and very adult-like as well. So I really liked this movie because it had that childness to it as well when it came to Toothless and the dragon, and very funny moments, but it also had very serious tones when it came to Hiccup as this 20-something-year-old dealing with certain things in his life. My only issue with this movie is that even though the movie was like an hour and 40 minutes, it actually felt a lot longer than that. It actually felt like it could have been a 2-hour movie, because there was just certain points in the movie that it felt like it was going to end, and then it kept going, and then it would get to a point when it felt like it was going to end, and then it kept going, and for whatever reason that gave me the impression that the movie was a lot longer than it really was. And I remember walking out of the theater and wondering, how long was that movie? It felt so long, to then learn the movie was only like an hour and 42 minutes. So overall, I definitely recommend this movie to anybody who's a fan of the first film or semi-liked the first film. Check this movie out because you're going to be surprised by it, and I guarantee that you're going to enjoy it. You're going to have a good laugh with it, and you're going to have some emotional moments with it as well. As for anybody else, I suggest check out the first one. If you like it, go see this movie because I believe it's worth it. So that is my review of How to Train Your Dragon 2. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. Days of Future Past is directed by Bryan Singer. It stars a bunch of talented actors and actresses who I'm not going to name because the list is endless. Now, the premise of the story basically starts off where the X-Men are in the future. They're living in this world that is just ran by Sentinels, and the Sentinels basically main focus is to get anybody who's affiliated with mutants in a positive way, or who is a mutant, and taking them and killing them or putting them in concentration camps. And they live